I am standing in the parking lot of a community college in Richmond, Virginia, staring at two pregnancy tests sitting on the hood of my truck, both positive, both belonging to my sisters. The same sisters I gave up everything for. The same ones I worked 3 jobs to put through school while I slept 4 hours a night on a mattress that had springs poking through the fabric. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 50 years old now, but this story takes me back to when I was 32, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Richmond, raising 2 teenage girls who weren't my daughters but might as well have been. Before you judge me for what I did next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened after I saw those tests changed everything I believed about sacrifice, family, and whether love is ever really enough. The air that April morning smelled like fresh cut grass and gasoline. I remember because I'd just filled up my tank, getting ready to drive 6 hours to surprise my sisters at their graduation rehearsal. I had their caps and gowns in the back seat, paid for with money I'd been saving for 2 years. Tasha was 21. Keisha was 22. They were supposed to walk across that stage in 3 weeks. The first people in our family to ever get college degrees. I was so proud I could barely sleep the night before. I'd told everyone at the warehouse where I worked. I'd called our aunt in North Carolina. I'd even posted about it on Facebook, something I never did. And then my phone rang. It was Tasha, crying so hard I thought someone had died. "Marcus," she said, her voice breaking like glass. "I need to tell you something. And Keisha does too." That's when they told me to meet them. That's when they handed me those tests. That's when my whole world turned into something I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just stood there, holding those plastic sticks in my oil-stained hands, feeling something inside me shut down like a breaker switch flipping off in a basement. Tasha kept saying she was sorry. Keisha wouldn't even look at me. Cars were pulling in and out of the lot, people laughing, music playing from someone's open window. Life was going on around me like nothing had changed, but for me, everything had. I'd dropped out of high school at 16 to take care of them after our mother died of a heart attack in a grocery store. I'd worked as a dishwasher, a landscaper, a night shift security guard. I'd lived on ramen noodles and tap water. I'd worn the same 3 shirts for 5 years. I'd missed birthdays, holidays, chances to date, chances to live, and all of it, every single sacrifice had been for this moment. The moment they'd graduate. The moment they'd be okay. The moment I could finally breathe. But standing there in that parking lot, I realized something that made my chest feel like it was caving in. They weren't going to graduate. They were going to drop out. They were going to have babies with men they barely knew, men who weren't even there that morning, men who'd probably disappear before the kids turned 2. And I was going to be expected to help, to step in, to raise more kids that weren't mine while my own life stayed frozen in place like a photograph nobody ever looked at. I could see it all happening before it even started. Tasha would move back in with me. Keisha would need money for diapers and formula. I'd be 35, then 40, then 50, Still working, still sacrificing, still putting myself last. And I felt something I'd never let myself feel before. Anger. Not the kind that makes you yell, the kind that makes you go quiet, the kind that makes you walk away. So I put those tests back on the hood of my truck, looked at my sisters one last time, and said 6 words I've never taken back. I'm done. Don't call me again. I was 16 years old, washing dishes at a seafood restaurant on Broad Street in Richmond, when I got the call that Mama had collapsed in the cereal aisle at Kroger. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, and the kitchen was hot as hell. Steam rising off the industrial dishwasher, grease smell so thick it stuck to your skin even after you showered. I was scrubbing a pot with burnt rice stuck to the bottom when my manager, a white guy named Dale with a beer gut and a pager on his belt, came back and told me I had a phone call. I thought it was Mama calling to remind me to pick up milk on the way home. She did that sometimes, worried I'd forget. But it wasn't her voice on the other end. It was a paramedic, calm and professional, telling me my mother had suffered a massive heart attack and didn't make it. I remembered dropping the phone. I remember Dale catching me before I hit the floor. I remember the sound of plates clattering in the dining room, and someone laughing, and thinking how strange it was that the world just kept moving when mine had stopped. Tasha was 10. Keisha was 11. They were at home watching cartoons when I got there, still in my work uniform that smelled like bleach and crab legs. They didn't understand at first. I told them Mama was gone, and Tasha asked if she was coming back from the store soon. Keisha just stared at me with these big brown eyes, waiting for me to smile and say it was a joke. But I couldn't smile. I could barely breathe. Our aunt flew in from Charlotte for the funeral, but she had 4 kids of her own and a husband who worked construction and couldn't take us in. Social services came by the apartment, a woman with a clipboard and a kind face, and she said they'd have to split us up if we went into the system. Foster homes, different families, maybe different cities. I looked at my sisters sitting on the couch, holding hands, and I made a decision that would define the next 16 years of my life. I told the woman I'd take care of them. I'd drop out of school, get a full-time job, keep us together. She said it wasn't realistic. I said I didn't care. I got my GED 6 months later and started working 2 jobs. Days at a landscaping company, cutting grass and trimming hedges in the Virginia heat until my hands blistered and my back ached. Nights at a gas station, standing behind bulletproof glass, selling cigarettes and lottery tickets to people who looked at me like I was invisible. I came home every night around 2 in the morning, checked on the girls, and slept on the couch because they shared the only bedroom. I cooked whatever I could afford: spaghetti with butter, eggs and toast, chicken legs on sale. I helped Tasha with her homework, even though I'd barely passed math myself. I braided Keisha's hair every Sunday because Mama used to do it, and I didn't want her to forget what that felt like. I went to parent-teacher conferences in my work boots, dirt still under my fingernails, and smiled when the teachers said the girls were doing great. I never told them I was their brother. I let them think I was their dad. It was easier that way. The years blurred together like that. Tasha and Keisha growing taller, smarter, louder. Me getting older, quieter, more tired. I watched other guys my age go to college, get married, start careers, buy houses. I watched them post pictures on Facebook of vacations and promotions and engagement rings. I didn't feel jealous. I felt nothing. My life wasn't about me anymore. It was about making sure my sisters had a shot at something better. When Tasha got accepted to Virginia Commonwealth University, I cried in the bathroom so she wouldn't see. When Keisha got in too, a year later, I worked a third job on weekends at a warehouse loading trucks so I could help with their tuition. I didn't party.
I didn't date. I didn't have time for friends.
My whole world was them, and I told myself it was worth it. That one day when they graduated, when they had good jobs and families of their own, I'd look back and feel proud that all the sacrifice would make sense. But deep down, in a place I didn't like to visit, I wondered if I'd ever get my own life back, if I'd ever meet someone who loved me, if I'd ever do something just because I wanted to, not because someone needed me to. I'd lie awake at night on that lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of sirens outside and the hum of the refrigerator, and I'd feel this weight pressing down on my chest. Not anger, not regret. Just this heavy, suffocating feeling that I was disappearing a little bit every day. That Marcus Webb, the kid who used to draw cartoons in the margins of his notebooks and dream about becoming a graphic designer, was gone. And in his place was someone I didn't recognize. A ghost. A paycheck. A man who existed only to keep other people alive. And the scariest part was, I didn't know how to be anything else. I didn't know who I was without them. So when that call came, when Tasha's voice cracked, and she told me she was pregnant, something inside me finally snapped. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to put it back together. Tasha was always the sensitive one, cried during commercials with sad music, kept a journal with a little lock on it, wrote poetry she never showed anyone. She reminded me of Mama in that way. Soft-hearted. Easy to hurt. I used to worry about her more than Keisha because I knew the world could be cruel to people who felt too much. But she was smart. Got straight A's without even trying. Her teachers told me she could be a doctor or a lawyer or anything she wanted. She had this way of lighting up a room when she smiled, this laugh that made you forget whatever you were stressed about. I thought college would be good for her, thought she'd find herself, make friends, figure out what she wanted to do with her life. I never thought she'd find a man who'd ruin everything. His name was Deshaun. I met him once, maybe twice, when I drove up to campus to drop off groceries. He was tall, good-looking, wore expensive sneakers and a gold chain. Tasha said he was studying business, that he had plans to start his own company. He shook my hand, called me sir, and I wanted to believe he was decent. But something in his eyes didn't sit right with me. Something slick. Something that reminded me of the guys I grew up around who talked big but never followed through. I asked Tasha if she was being careful. She got embarrassed, told me not to worry, said she wasn't a kid anymore. I dropped it. I didn't want to be the overprotective brother who couldn't let go. I thought she was smart enough to make her own choices. Turns out, she wasn't. Or maybe she was just 21 and in love and didn't know the difference yet. Keisha was different, tougher, louder. She didn't cry at commercials. She argued with her professors, stayed out late, came home with attitude when I asked where she'd been. We fought more than me and Tasha ever did. She thought I was controlling. I thought she was reckless. But she was also loyal, would fight anyone who talked bad about our family, would defend Tasha even when Tasha was wrong. She had this fire in her that I recognized because I used to have it too, before life beat it out of me. I thought college would focus that fire, turn it into something productive. She was studying social work, wanted to help kids in the system like we almost were. I was proud of that. Thought maybe she'd understand sacrifice because she'd seen me make it. But then she met a guy named Terrence. Terrence was in his 30s, worked at a car dealership, had a kid already with some other woman. I didn't like him from the jump. He was too old for her, too smooth, too quick to buy her things she didn't need. I told Keisha he was using her. She told me I was jealous she had a life and I didn't. That hurt more than I wanted to admit, because she wasn't wrong. I didn't have a life. I had work and bills and sleepless nights. I had gray hairs coming in and knees that ached when it rained. I was 32 and felt 50. So maybe I was jealous. Maybe I was bitter. But I also knew what I was talking about. I'd seen men like Terrence my whole life. Men who took and took until there was nothing left. And I begged her to be careful. She said she had it under control. She didn't. The months before everything fell apart, I thought we were good. Tasha called me every Sunday, told me about her classes, asked how I was doing. Keisha texted me memes and pictures of her dorm room. I sent them money when I could, even though I was barely making rent. I worked overtime, picked up extra shifts, saved a little every week in a coffee can in my kitchen. That money was for their graduation. I was going to throw them a party, rent out a hall, invite everyone who'd ever doubted us, show the world that we made it, that we survived, that Marcus Webb did something that mattered. I imagined walking into that ceremony, seeing their names called, watching them cross the stage. I imagined hugging them afterward, telling them I loved them, finally feeling like I could rest, like I could start living for myself. But that dream died the day Tasha's voice cracked on the phone, and I knew, before she even said it, that everything I'd worked for was gone. It was a Saturday morning in April, and I was in the kitchen frying eggs when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because I was tired. I'd worked a double shift the night before, loading boxes at the warehouse until my shoulders burned and my hands cramped up. I'd gotten home around 5 in the morning, slept 2 hours, and dragged myself out of bed because I had to go grocery shopping and pay the electric bill before it got shut off. The phone rang 3 times before I picked it up, and when I heard Tasha's voice, I knew something was wrong. She wasn't crying yet, but her breathing was shaky, like she was trying to hold something in. "Marcus," she said, "can you come up here? I need to talk to you." I turned off the stove. My stomach dropped. I asked if she was okay. She said yes, then no. And then she started crying. I got in my truck and drove. Didn't shower. Didn't change. Just threw on a jacket and started the 6-hour trip to VCU, my heart pounding the whole way. I called Keisha to see if she knew what was going on, but she didn't pick up. I called Tasha back, but she didn't answer either. I drove through small towns and empty highways, past tobacco fields and gas stations and churches with signs that said Jesus saves. I thought about every possible thing that could have happened. Maybe she failed a class. Maybe she got in a fight. Maybe Deshaun broke up with her. I didn't think it was something I couldn't fix. I was good at fixing things. I'd been fixing things my whole life. I told myself whatever it was, we'd figure it out. We always did. But the closer I got to Richmond, the more my hand shook on the steering wheel. I met them at a coffee shop near campus, one of those places with brick walls and chalkboard menus and college kids on laptops pretending to study. Tasha was sitting in the back corner, wearing a VCU hoodie and sweatpants, her eyes red and puffy. Keisha was next to her, arms crossed, staring at the table. I sat down across from them, and for a long time nobody said anything. The barista called out someone's order. Group of girls laughed by the window. The whole world felt normal, except for us. Finally, Tasha pulled something out of her bag and slid it across the table. A pregnancy test. Positive. I stared at it like it was written in a language I didn't understand. Then Keisha slid another one across. Also positive. And just like that, everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, crumbled into dust. I don't remember what I said first. I think I asked if they were sure. Tasha nodded. Keisha still wouldn't look at me. I asked how far along they were. Tasha said 3 months. Keisha said 2. I asked where the fathers were. Tasha said Deshaun told her to handle it. Keisha said Terrence blocked her number. I felt something rise up in my throat, something hot and sharp, and I had to look away before I said something I'd regret. I thought about all the times I'd warned them, all the times I'd begged them to be careful, all the times they'd rolled their eyes and told me I was being dramatic. I thought about the money in that coffee can, the party I'd planned, the pride I'd felt, and I realized it was all gone. Not just delayed, gone. Because they weren't going to graduate now. They were going to drop out, have babies, struggle. And I was going to be expected to catch them. Again, I asked them what they wanted to do. Tasha said she didn't know. Keisha said she was keeping it. I asked if they understood what that meant. The diapers, the doctor's visits, the sleepless nights, the money, the jobs they wouldn't get, the degrees they wouldn't finish. Tasha started crying harder. Keisha finally looked at me, and her eyes were full of defiance, like she was daring me to judge her. And I realized something in that moment that broke me. They didn't get it. They didn't understand what I'd given up. They didn't understand that I wasn't their father. that I was just a kid who tried to do the right thing and ended up losing himself in the process. And now they wanted me to do it again, to sacrifice more, to keep giving until there was nothing left. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. So I stood up, told them I needed air, and walked out of that coffee shop. And when I got to my truck, I sat in the driver's seat and cried for the first time since Mama died. I didn't go back inside. I texted Tasha and told her I needed time to think. She texted back asking when I'd be ready to talk. I didn't answer. I started the truck, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove. Not toward home. Just drove. Through streets I didn't recognize. Past neighborhoods that looked nothing like mine. I ended up in a park somewhere, sitting on a bench, watching kids play on a jungle gym while their parents stood around talking and laughing like life was easy, and maybe for them it was. Maybe they had partners who helped. Maybe they had money saved. Maybe they'd never had to choose between their own dreams and someone else's survival. I sat there until the sun went down, until the park emptied out, until a cop car rolled by and slowed down like they were checking on me. I waved, kept my hands visible, drove home. The apartment felt different when I walked in. Quieter. Like it knew something had changed. I looked around at the peeling wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. I thought about how long I'd been living like this. 16 years. More than half my 20s. All of my early 30s. And what did I have to show for it? A rusted truck.
A bad back. A savings account with $300.
I'd given everything, and it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Because no matter how much I sacrificed, life kept asking for more. And I was tired. So tired I could feel it in my bones. Tired of being strong. Tired of being the one who fixed things. Tired of pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I sat down on the couch and stared at the wall until my eyes burned. I thought about calling someone. A friend. But I didn't have friends. Not real ones. I had coworkers I barely talked to and neighbors who nodded when they saw me but didn't know my name. I thought about calling my aunt, but what would I say? That the girls I'd raised, the ones I'd dropped out of school for, had gotten pregnant and thrown their futures away? That I felt like a failure? That I didn't know if I could keep going? She'd tell me to pray, to have faith, to remember that God had a plan. And maybe he did. But if this was the plan, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why some people got easy lives and others got mine. Why some people got to be selfish and still end up happy, while I did everything right and ended up empty. I opened my phone and scrolled through pictures. Tasha's high school graduation. Keisha's first day of college. The three of us at Thanksgiving, smiling like we were a real family. And we were. That was the problem. They were my family. I loved them more than I loved myself. But love wasn't enough anymore. Love had drained me dry. Love had taken every dream I ever had and turned it into something for someone else. And I didn't know how to keep loving like that without disappearing completely. So I made a decision. I didn't know if it was the right one. I still don't. But it was the only one I had left. I wasn't going to raise their kids. I wasn't going to be the backup plan. I wasn't going to sacrifice another decade of my life for mistakes that weren't mine. I was done. And if that made me selfish, if that made me a bad brother, then so be it. Because for once, I had to choose me. I called Tasha. 3 days later, she answered on the first ring, hopeful, like she thought I'd come around. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "Are you okay?" I told her I wasn't. I told her I'd been thinking, and I needed to be honest. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, waiting. I said, "I can't do this anymore." She asked what I meant. I said, "I can't be the one who fixes everything. I can't raise your kids. I can't keep sacrificing my life for yours." She started crying immediately, said I was all they had, said I was abandoning them, said Mama would be ashamed of me. And that last part almost broke me, but I held on. I told her Mama would want them to take responsibility for their own choices. I told her I loved them, but I was done. She hung up, didn't say goodbye, just hung up. Keisha texted me an hour later, called me every name in the book, said I was a coward, said I was bitter because I never had my own life, said I was jealous, and maybe she was right about some of it. Maybe I was bitter, maybe I was jealous. But that didn't change the fact that I'd given them everything and they'd thrown it away. That didn't change the fact that they expected me to keep giving while they made the same mistakes I'd warned them about. I didn't respond to her text. I blocked both their numbers, changed my locks, took a week off work, and stayed in the apartment, barely eating, barely sleeping, feeling like I'd cut off my own arms and couldn't figure out how to stop the bleeding. People at work noticed something was wrong. My supervisor, a guy named Daryl who'd been there 20 years, asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He didn't believe me. Said I looked like hell. Said if I needed to talk, his door was open. I appreciated it, but I didn't take him up on it. What was I supposed to say? That I'd raised my sisters for 16 years and cut them off because they got pregnant? That I felt guilty and relieved at the same time? That I didn't know if I'd made the right choice, but I knew I couldn't go back? I kept my head down, did my job, went home. Repeated. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I didn't hear from Tasha or Keisha. Didn't reach out. Told myself it was better this way. That they'd figure it out. That I'd done enough. But the guilt didn't go away. It followed me everywhere. At the grocery store, I'd see baby formula and think about them. At night, I'd lie awake wondering if they were okay, if they had enough money, if they were eating, if they hated me. I started drinking more than I should have. Nothing crazy, just a couple beers after work to help me sleep. Then 3, then 4. Then I stopped counting. I wasn't an alcoholic. I was just tired, tired of thinking, tired of feeling, tired of wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought cutting them off would set me free, but it didn't. It just made me feel more alone than I'd ever been. Because the truth was, they weren't the only ones who needed me. I needed them too. They were the only family I had left. And now they were gone, not dead. Just gone. And I didn't know if that was better or worse. 6 months after I cut them off, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in Tasha's handwriting. The same loopy cursive she used to practice in middle school. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me was afraid of what it might say. But I opened it. And what I read made me hate myself more than I already did. She started by saying she understood why I was angry, that she was sorry for letting me down, that she thought about me every day. She told me she'd had the baby, a girl, named her Nia after Mama, said she was beautiful, that she had Mama's eyes. She said Deshaun was gone just like I predicted, that she was working part-time at a call center and living in a one-bedroom apartment with roaches and a leaky ceiling. She said Keisha had her baby too, a boy. That Terrence showed up once, saw the baby, and never came back. She said they were struggling, but they were trying. And she didn't ask me for money. Didn't ask me to come back. She just said she forgave me. That she knew I'd given up everything for them and that she was sorry it wasn't enough. And then she said something that gutted me. Discovered by Peacehead. I hope you find peace, Marcus. I hope you finally get to live for yourself. You deserve it. And I sat there in my kitchen, holding that letter, and cried like a child. I thought about calling her, apologizing, telling her I was wrong. But I didn't. Because I wasn't sure I was wrong. I was still angry. Still hurt. Still exhausted. And I didn't trust myself not to fall back into the same pattern. So I put the letter in a drawer and tried to forget about it. But I couldn't. It haunted me. The image of Tasha in some rundown apartment with a baby and no help. The thought of Keisha struggling alone. The fact that they were suffering, and I could have helped but chose not to. I told myself they'd made their choices, that I'd made mine. That life was about consequences. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Because family isn't about consequences. It's about love. And I loved them. I always had, but I didn't know how to love them without losing myself. And I was too scared to try. I started seeing a therapist around that time, a woman named Dr. Greenberg. Charlene Brooks, who had an office in a strip mall next to a laundromat. I didn't want to go at first. Thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle their problems. But Daryl at work convinced me to try it. Said it helped him after his divorce. So I went. Sat on a couch that smelled like lavender and told a stranger my life story. Doctor. Brooks didn't judge me. Didn't tell me I was right or wrong. She just listened, and then she asked me a question that changed everything. She said, "Marcus, if you could go back and do it all over again, would you still raise your sisters?" I said yes without hesitating. She asked why. I said because I loved them. She said, "Then why are you punishing yourself for something that came from love?" And I didn't have an answer. We talked about guilt, about sacrifice, about the difference between helping someone and enabling them. She said cutting off my sisters wasn't cruel if it was about protecting myself, that I had the right to set boundaries, that I didn't owe anyone my whole life, not even family. But she also said forgiveness wasn't about them, it was about me. That holding on to anger and guilt would eat me alive if I let it. She asked if I'd ever considered reaching out. Not to go back to how things were, but to find a middle ground. To see if we could have a relationship that didn't drain me. I said I didn't know if that was possible. She said, "You won't know until you try." And for the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt hope. Not a lot, just a flicker. But it was enough to make me think about that letter again. About Tasha's words. About whether peace was something you found or something you built. And whether I was brave enough to try building it. It took me another year to reach out. A whole year of therapy sessions and sleepless nights and conversations with myself that went in circles. I drafted a text 100 times and deleted it every time. I drove past their apartment once but didn't stop. I was scared. Scared they'd reject me. Scared they'd need too much. Scared I'd fall back into the same trap. But on Tasha's 23rd birthday, I finally sent a message. Just 3 words. "Happy birthday, Tasha." She responded in minutes. Said thank you. Said she missed me. Said Naya was walking now. Asked if I wanted to see her. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. We met at a park, neutral ground, somewhere public. I saw her from across the parking lot, pushing a stroller, and my heart almost stopped. She looked older. Tired, but still Tasha. Pff, still my little sister. Nia was beautiful. Dark curls. Big eyes. Shy smile. She hid behind Tasha's legs when I tried to talk to her, but eventually she warmed up, handed me a dandelion. I took it like it was a diamond. Tasha and I sat on a bench while Naya played in the sandbox. We didn't talk about the past at first. Just small talk. The weather. Her job. How Keisha was doing. She said Keisha was working at a daycare, that her son Jamal was healthy and loud and kept her up all night. I asked if they ever finished school. Tasha shook her head. Said she wanted to go back someday but didn't know when. I told her I was proud of her anyway. For trying. For surviving. She started crying, said she thought I hated her. I told her I never hated her. I was just angry, and hurt, and lost. She said she understood, and for the first time in a long time I believed we'd be okay. Keisha was harder. She didn't want to see me at first. Said I'd abandon them when they needed me most. And she wasn't wrong. I had. But Tasha convinced her to meet for coffee, and we sat across from each other like strangers. She wouldn't look at me, kept her arms crossed. I apologized, told her I was sorry for cutting them off, for not being there, for making them feel like I didn't care. She said sorry wasn't enough, said I'd hurt her more than any man ever had. And I knew she meant Terence. I told her she was right, that I had no excuse, that I was scared and selfish and I'd failed them. And then she finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet. She said, "You didn't fail us, Marcus. You saved us. And then you broke. And I get it. I really do. But it still hurt." And we both cried. And it didn't fix everything. But it was a start. We didn't go back to how things were. We couldn't. But we found something new. I saw them once a month, brought groceries, helped with bills when I could. But I didn't move them in. Didn't let them depend on me completely. I learned how to say no, how to set limits, how to love them without drowning in them. Doctor. Brooke said I was doing good, said I'd grown. I didn't feel grown. I just felt human, like I was finally allowed to be imperfect, to have needs, to exist as more than just someone's savior. And it felt good, scary, but good. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to be Marcus. And that was enough. The years after that were different, quieter. I started taking art classes at the community college, drawing again. Something I hadn't done since I was a kid. Turned out I was still pretty good at it. My instructor, an older black woman named Miss Gale, said I had talent, that I should keep going. I did. Started selling prints online. Nothing crazy. Just enough to make some extra money and feel like I was creating something that mattered, something that was mine. I even dated a little. Met a woman named Angela at a grocery store. We went to dinner a few times. She was kind, patient. Didn't push when I told her about my past. We didn't last. Different lives, different goals. But it felt good to try. To remember I was allowed to want things for myself. To remember I was more than just what I'd given up. Tasha went back to school, took online classes, slow, part-time, but she was doing it. She called me when she finished her first semester, crying happy tears, and I felt something in my chest loosen. Pride. Not for me. For her. She was stronger than I'd ever given her credit for. Keisha got a promotion at the daycare, started taking business classes, talking about opening her own place someday. I believed her. She had that fire again, the one I thought was gone. And watching them grow, watching them fight for their own lives instead of waiting for me to save them, made me realize something. I'd taught them that. Not by being perfect, but by finally choosing myself. By showing them that sometimes love means letting go, that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is step back and let them figure it out. And they did. Not perfectly. But they did. I turned 50 this year, had a small party at my apartment. Tasha and Keisha came with the kids. Angela stopped by. Daryl from work brought a cake. Ms. Daryl Ladd. Gail gave me a sketchbook. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever had. We ate pizza and laughed, and Naya sang me happy birthday off key, and Jamal tried to blow out all the candles himself. And I looked around that room at these people who knew me, really knew me, flaws and mistakes and all, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Content. Not happy. Not yet. But content. Like maybe I'd finally found some kind of peace. Like maybe all the pain had been worth it. Not because everything turned out perfect, but because we survived. We grew. We forgave. And that was enough. Dr. Brooks asked me in our last session if I regretted cutting my sisters off. I said yes and no. Yes, because it hurt them and hurt me, and created a wound that took years to heal. No, because it taught me I was allowed to have limits. That sacrifice without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. She asked if I'd do it differently if I could go back. I said, maybe, probably. But I couldn't go back. All I could do was move forward. And that's what I was trying to do. One day at a time, one sketch at a time, one visit with my niece and nephew at a time, building something new from the pieces of what broke. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not fixing what was broken, but learning to live with the cracks. Learning that you can love people and still choose yourself. That you can be flawed and still be enough. That you can walk away and still find your way back. And that peace isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build. Brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. 2 years after we reconnected, Tasha called me at midnight. I almost didn't answer because late night calls still scared me. Reminded me of the night Mama died, but I picked up. She was crying, not sad crying. Angry crying. Said she needed to tell me something she should have told me years ago. My stomach dropped. I asked if she was okay, if the kids were okay. She said yes. Then she said, Marcus, I need you to know it wasn't all your fault. The way we turned out, the choices we made. You did everything right. We were just young and stupid and we took you for granted. And I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. She kept going. Said she'd been in therapy too. That her counselor helped her see how much pressure we'd all been under. How losing Mama had broken all of us in different ways. How I'd been a kid raising kids and nobody ever taught me how. How she'd spent years blaming me for leaving but never took responsibility for her own choices. She said Keisha felt the same way but was too proud to say it. That they'd talked about it. About how they'd expected me to fix everything and never thought about what it cost me. About how they'd been mad at me for being human. For breaking under weight no one should have had to carry. And she said something that made me pull over to the side of the road because I couldn't see through my tears. She said, You were 16, Marcus. 16. And you gave us a life. You kept us together. You loved us when nobody else did. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be half as strong as you were. And I just sat there in my truck, on the shoulder of an empty road, sobbing into the phone, because I'd carried that guilt for so long. The guilt of not being enough, of walking away, of choosing myself, and hearing her say it wasn't my fault, that I'd done more than anyone had a right to ask, broke something open inside me that I didn't even know was still locked. We talked for 2 hours that night, about Mama, about the funeral, about all the things we'd never said because we were too busy surviving to feel. She told me she remembered the night I came home and told them I was dropping out of school. Said she'd heard me crying in the bathroom afterward. Said she'd wanted to tell me it was okay, that we'd figure something else out, but she was too scared, too young. She said she wished she'd been braver. I told her she was brave now. That raising Mia alone, going back to school, building a life from nothing, that was brave. She laughed through her tears, said she learned it from me, and I realized something that night that changed everything. I'd spent years thinking I'd failed them, but I hadn't. I'd taught them how to survive, how to get back up, how to keep going even when everything falls apart. And maybe that was the greatest gift I could have given them. Keisha called me the next day, said Tasha told her we talked. Said she wanted to say her piece too. She apologized. Said she'd been angry at me because she was really angry at herself, at Terrence, at the choices she'd made. Said it was easier to blame me than to look in the mirror. I told her I understood, that I'd done the same thing. Blamed her and Tasha when I was really just scared and exhausted and didn't know how to ask for help. We cried together, laughed about stupid stuff, remembered good times. Like the Christmas I bought them matching bikes from a pawn shop and stayed up all night trying to put them together with instructions in Spanish. Like the time Tasha got her first period, and I panicked and called 3 different women at church to figure out what to do. Like the time Keisha broke her arm and I carried her 6 blocks to the hospital because we didn't have money for an ambulance. We'd been through hell, but we'd been through it together, and that counted for something. They came over that weekend, both of them, with the kids, and we sat in my living room, the one I'd kept clean and simple because I'd finally learned I didn't have to fill every space with other people's needs, and we just existed together. No drama, no crisis, just family. Mia showed me a drawing she'd made at school. Jamal asked if I had any cookies. Tasha told me she'd gotten an A in her statistics class. Keisha said she'd signed a lease on a space for her daycare, and I felt it. The thing I'd been chasing my whole life. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not the kind where nothing hurts. But the kind where you've been through the fire and come out the other side scarred but standing. The kind where you know you'll be okay even when things aren't okay. The kind where you've forgiven yourself for being human. And I looked at my sisters, these women who'd been girls when I started raising them, and I saw Mama in their faces, in their strength, in their resilience. And I knew, finally, that I'd done right by her, that wherever she was proud. And that was enough. I'm 50 now, standing in my small apartment that doesn't feel empty anymore, looking at the life I've built from the wreckage of the one I thought I'd have. It's not the life I imagined when I was 16 and still believed in fairy tales. It's better, messier, more real. I have a job I don't hate, a side business selling art that brings in enough to feel like it matters, a therapist who keeps me honest, a nephew and niece who call me Uncle Marcus and mean it, sisters who check on me as much as I check on them. And I have myself, the part of me I thought I'd lost forever, the part that knows how to dream, how to rest, how to say no, how to say yes, how to be more than just what everyone needs me to be. Tasha graduated last year, 27 years old, walking across that stage with Naya in the audience screaming, "That's my mama." I was there. Front row, camera in hand, crying like a baby. It wasn't the graduation I'd imagined all those years ago. It was better, because she'd earned it. Not because I'd dragged her across the finish line, because she'd decided she wanted it and fought for it herself. Keisha opened her daycare 6 months ago. Little Miracles Childcare. I helped her paint the walls, watched her cry when the first parents dropped off their kids. She's good at it. Patient. Firm. The kind of provider she needed when she was young. And I'm proud of her, in a way I couldn't have been if I'd just fixed everything for her. Because this is hers. She built it. And it's beautiful. I still have hard days. Days when the guilt creeps back in. When I wonder if cutting them off was cruel. If there was another way. If I should have been stronger. Doctor. Brooks reminds me on those days that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about putting yourself back together. About learning from the breaks. About giving yourself permission to be imperfect. And I'm trying to forgive myself for the mistakes. Trying to celebrate the victories, even the small ones. Trying to remember that my life matters too. That Marcus Webb isn't just a supporting character in someone else's story. That I get to be the main character in mine. And that's not selfish. That's survival. I think about Mama sometimes. Wonder what she'd say if she could see us now. I think she'd be proud. Not just of Tasha and Keisha. Of me. For doing the impossible. For keeping us together when the world wanted to split us apart. For sacrificing when I had to, and walking away when I had no choice. For learning the difference. For teaching my sisters that love doesn't mean losing yourself. That you can be there for people without disappearing. That family is about showing up, but it's also about boundaries. About honesty. About the hard conversations. And I think she'd tell me what she used to tell me when I was a kid and got too serious about things. Baby, you can't pour from an empty cup. She was right. It took me 18 years to learn that lesson, but I learned it. And I'm still here. Still learning. Still growing. Still trying. So if you're out there watching this, and you've ever had to choose between yourself and someone you love, I want you to know something. It's okay to choose yourself. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And if they really love you, they'll understand eventually. Maybe not right away. Maybe not for years. But they will. Because real love doesn't demand that you destroy yourself to prove it. Real love gives you room to breathe, to grow, to be whole. And if you've been carrying guilt like I did, if you've been wondering if you did the right thing, I can't tell you the answer. Only you know that. But I can tell you this. You deserve peace. You deserve a life that's yours. You deserve to be more than what you give away. And it's never too late to start building that. Never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to say enough. Because you are enough. Just as you are. Scars and all. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it needed to be told. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to make a choice like mine. Tell me if you found peace or if you're still looking for it. Because we're all in this together trying to figure out how to love people without losing ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing our stories we help each other find the way. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Real stories. Hard stories. Die. Stories about what it means to be human in a world that asks too much. And remember, It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away. And it's okay to come back. Because life isn't about getting it right the first time. It's about learning, growing, forgiving, and finding your way home, even if home looks different than you thought it would. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.